trying to get back to the basics of great products.
Power comes from sharing information.
I try to convince people to slow down.
Free. Open.
This is the Soaked by Slush podcast.
Is there a common denominator behind Smartly.io's sale of a majority stake to Providence Equity Partners, SoftBank's acquisition and sale of its stakes in Supercell, and Telia's investment in Spotify? Yes, there is, and it's called Hannes Snellman, and they are today's episode's sponsor. Hannes Snellman is a Nordic law firm proud to carry responsibility entrusted to it by these and other clients in pivotal tech-driven transactions. Regardless of the size of a project, Hannes Snellman's dedication and world-class combinations of skills and experience remain the same. The firm advises leading and aspiring international and local corporations and investors across all business sectors. Hannes Snellman has the expertise and capacity to handle any demanding local or cross-border matters in which assets are being developed, protected, financed, acquired, or under dispute. So go check Hannes Snellman out from the link in the bio. Thanks again for being aboard. Now, let's go to the episode. All right, hello everyone. Welcome back to a new episode of Soaked by Slush podcast. My name is William von der Palen and Isak Rautio is still in Copenhagen. Hi, Isak.
Hi, William. Nice to meet you again.
Yeah, it's super nice to be here. And I think our cool factor of our guest list just rose to a new level with today's guest. So we have the founder of Wikipedia, Jimmy Wales, as a guest today. Welcome to the show.
Great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah,
Great honor to have you.
Very big honor. We thought we could start off, just by a simple question to see how involved you still are with Wikipedia today and what the daily life at Wikipedia looks like.
Yeah, no, I'm still very involved. I am active in the community. I am on the board of directors, but I don't work at the Wikimedia Foundation. So I set up the Wikimedia Foundation to own and operate Wikipedia, but I don't have a job there, which is nice for me. I get to be a member of the community and representative on the board and all of that. So it's quite good.
Yeah, do you edit articles yourself still? Are you still looking into it?
I do. Not very much, but I do occasionally make a small correction here or there. And if I see anything that needs help, I try and jump in and help. But mostly I'm just talking in the community about policy, editorial policy, quality control, being thoughtful about how we do things, things like that.
That's an interesting story. It's been many years from the inception of Wikipedia until now, and the policy and the philosophy behind it is a big part of Wikipedia and always has been. Let's go back to the starting years. Can you speak a bit on the founding ideas and just the principles on which you built Wikipedia and why?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, in the early days before Wikipedia, I had a project called Newpedia. Which was the same vision, a free encyclopedia. But I didn't really know how to build it. I didn't know how to create a free encyclopedia, so we just started testing and trying things. So the first version was called Newpedia, and I hired a PhD in philosophy to help organize it. And we created a 7-stage review process to get anything published. And I knew it was going to fail when I decided I was frustrated with how slow the progress was. So I said, look, I'll write an article myself. And it was very intimidating because they were going to take my biography and send it to the most prestigious professors they could find to review it. And it was a pretty scary process. And I realized this isn't fun. Nobody's going to want to do this if it isn't fun. So no wonder we're not getting much work done. And so then we, back then nobody said the word pivot, but we pivoted and switched to a wiki model, which one of my employees had shown me. And I said, great, let's try that. So we did.
Yeah, I listened to an episode where of Masters of Scale where you talked to Reid Hoffman about this and about finding basically product value fit and not just a product market fit and then taking off from there. And speaking on that, you've had a pretty interesting story with Wikipedia as a whole. You have a very maybe contradictory business model if you look at most tech companies today, and you've also succeeded despite not taking any VC money. But you argued, I've heard a few podcasts with you where you argued that these very things, not monetizing, not taking VC money, are actually the reasons why you did succeed in the end with Wikipedia.
Yeah, I think that's part of the reason, but of course, nobody knows for sure. History is like that. You make decisions and you don't get to find out what was down the other branch. But Fandom, which used to be called Wikia, which is advertising-supported wiki communities on hundreds of thousands of topics, is something like the number 20 website on the internet, has been incredibly successful, still growing very quickly today. Very strong revenue, so who knows, maybe Wikipedia could have followed that model, but I'm happy that it didn't, simply because of what it's become in our culture and what's meaningful. And also I'm a big believer that in many ways your business model drives your organization in a particular direction, and having the business model of just getting people to donate money has been very powerful at keeping us very pure and on our mission. And we don't have all the problems that people are having in social media around algorithms maybe not being healthy for the world because they're driving people to be addicted and stay on the website as long as possible and seeing as many ads as possible, where we don't even think about things like that. We just sort of, it's what the community writes is what there is to read, and you can come and read it.
Do you think it's a model that could have been replicated? And it's a big conversation how this whole monetization model has evolved in the internet economy. Like we speak that data is the new raw material, or the new sort of basic resource like oil in the modern economy, kind of. Do you see that the Wikipedia model could have had a wider application? I know it's a wiki model, but the sort of a different way of monetizing it, kind of.
Well, I do, and when you look around for things that are similar, it's you can look at open source software, but the business model there is actually quite different. In general, that's about lots of different kind of sub business models around it, but it's not about people donating money. That's a very minor piece of the whole puzzle. I was on the board of the Guardian newspaper here in the UK, and they have a similar model. No, they do have ads, but they've decided not to have a paywall, and they just ask people to please donate to support, and they've been very successful with that. So that's a similar type of model. And then today I'm trying the same type of model with my pilot project social network, WT.social, which is Wiki Tribune Social, where there's no paywall and there's no advertising, and so people just pay if they want to, and it's working reasonably well. We've got a long way to go. It's still a pilot project. There's a lot of the product still has a lot of development that needs to happen, and we're learning as we go, building something new. But people are optimistic, and they're supporting, and they're saying, okay, yeah, this is worth a try anyway.
Yeah. I think we definitely want to get into that at the end of the podcast. I read about that too, and it sounded really, really interesting. But do you think the monetization models on the web will change? And do you think there would be a bigger benefit, not just a need or not the possibility, but a bigger benefit from having also a wider spread of not just algorithm-tied, advertisement-tied business models on the web?
Yeah, and I think we're already seeing that change. I mean, we're seeing. For example, around journalism, we're seeing the newfound kind of resurgence of the idea of subscriptions. People are paying for subscriptions, and some publications are being very, very successful with that model, which I think is a fantastic thing, because it's having a pure advertising business model for journalism has always been very problematic, because it just drives you to chase clicks and to sort of go for the lowest common denominator, the cheapest content that drives eyeballs, most of which is harmless, but as we're finding out, sometimes it's disinformation that drives eyeballs, and that's not healthy. Whereas with paid, subscriptions, that's where you can get a different kind of quality and a different set of incentives for the news organization to really think about what their readers need and are willing to pay for.
Yeah, you're actually the customer and not the sort of pseudo customer. Exactly.
Yes, exactly.
But isn't there the other side then? I mean, as the internet is becoming more commercialized, and it's sort of this sort of new mainstreamization. Maybe I just made up that word, but the mainstreamization, commercialization of the internet, colliding with this culture of what the internet was built upon. The sort of open source, maybe free, I mean, democratization of knowledge and free information, no paywalls. How do you see this? Do you think about this clash ever? And how do you see it unfolding, and how do you see the culture?
Well, I do, and I do, and in fact, one of the things that when I'm active politically around defending the open internet and thinking about the legal structures and the rules that we should have, one of the things I'm really concerned about is well-meaning regulators who don't actually understand the internet very well and who definitely don't understand business strategy and things like that very well, because you can pass some sort of a regulation which is virtually impossible for a small website to comply with, that Facebook, for example, can afford to comply with because they're already dominant and they get a huge share of the ad revenue and so forth. One of the examples that I give of that is recently, we've had this huge fight over the European Copyright Directive, and now we're in a situation where it did pass and it's going to be implemented, although in a country by country manner. And a great example is given is a fan website for Lord of the Rings who were really concerned about it. And the reason is their users may be posting content that's copyrighted, and they need the safe harbor to be able to deal with that. They need some sort of an arrangement that works. They've been around for more than 3 years, and that's one of the rules. And so they are regulated exactly the same way as Facebook, and they're legally liable for potentially huge damages for something that one of their user does. And they're saying, you know what, actually, this is a hobby, right? It's a commercial website in a sense. We have a few ads on, but nobody's making a living out of it, right? It's a side project. And frankly, we could just move all of this onto a big Facebook group, and maybe we'll have to do that. Well, that's not the outcome anybody wants, right? That's not really empowering competition and innovation and so on. So I think we have to be very, very careful when we're thinking about internet policy to not just go, oh, here's a problem, here's a random idea for a law to solve it. Oh, it's solved. No, many, many side impacts and problems that can arise. So,
how much do you see? Since Wikipedia was founded almost 2 decades ago, it seems it's been around forever in a way. It also seems very new as an idea in many ways as well. But how much have the fundamentals of building a tech business, building a internet business changed in 2 decades, or have they changed?
I mean, they haven't. They haven't. I mean, one of the things that somebody said to me once, and I just sort of nodded along and I said, yeah. And then later I said, oh, you know what? Actually, I think that's really wrong. So somebody said, oh, well, yeah, in the early days with Wikipedia, you were able to start because everything was wide open and you just had to get a couple of servers and put it up. And now that would take such huge infrastructure costs and all that. And I said, yeah, of course, in the early days, of course. Then I thought, you know what, that's actually completely false. Like, it is cheaper than ever to start a new project, and easier than ever. Using AWS, of course, is quite popular, but DigitalOcean, there's a lot of great service providers out there that you can just buy just the incremental sort of services that you need in the cloud for very, very cheap. And so for entrepreneurs with clever ideas that could become popular, in some ways it's easier than ever. I mean, I had to physically buy servers and I put them in the racks myself, and hooked up all the Ethernet cables. Like, that was the level of actual work that we had to do back then. Now you wouldn't. You just, spin up a couple of servers on AWS and you're off to the races. So I think we still have that opportunity to do something. And because the internet is so global, there's still the opportunity to make something and scale it very, very quickly. And, obviously that often does take capital and so on and so forth. But I think it's still a very entrepreneurial time. And, maybe someday it won't be. Maybe we'll have such regulations that nobody can afford to start a new internet business because you can't afford to comply with all the regulations. But hopefully not.
Yeah, no, exactly. I get also a bit. I don't understand people who said it was so much easier before. Maybe it just seems that way because the ideas are easy to to understand in retrospect. But I mean, yeah, as you said, the world is opening up, and there's so many things you can do, and you have more opportunities than ever. So it shouldn't really be a problem for. Now is the time,
sure.
as many entrepreneurs agree with you. Now is the time, if ever, to do something.
Yeah. Now, my belief is that now is always the time, because I would say that the biggest problem that a lot of want to be entrepreneurs have is overthinking and waiting and imagining that you've got to come up with the perfect idea and have all the problems solved before you start. It doesn't work that way. You have to just get going and bumble through as best you can, and be ready to adapt and change when necessary.
Would you do anything differently if you founded Wikipedia today?
I mean, it's a very, very hard question. I always say I'm a pathological optimist, so I always think everything's going to be fine, and I think all the decisions were fine. It's hard because a decision that you made that was the best decision given the context of knowledge that you had is a decision that, after the fact, you can't really regret it, because you said, well, that's what I thought, because that's what I knew, and this is the information I had, and it was a good decision given that, but now I know more, and I realize I could have done it differently. So, for example, the whole launching of Newpedia and wasting 2 years on that, and then switching to the wiki model, I could have done Newpedia 2 years earlier. Wikipedia 2 years earlier, because the technology, even wikis, already existed and all of that. And so, in one sense, I said, well, I could have done it 2 years earlier, but I mean, how would I know that? I had to do it the wrong way first so that I could learn some things and begin to know how to do it the right way.
Yeah. Yeah, I understand that philosophy quite well, but and you've been asked this question a few times, but and as you said, it was quite value-based, the decision, and it was probably quite pivotal for the success. As you said, there's no way of knowing, but not monetizing the Wikipedia infrastructure and business in a way similar to Facebook or Google. Do you ever regret that decision?
No. I mean, it's great. I mean, I always say, journalists love to ask me, how does it feel to not be a billionaire? And I always say, I don't know. How does it feel to you? I think you're probably not a billionaire either.
Right.
It's kind of all right. I think. The one interview where I wasn't asked that, when I did the Reid Hoffman podcast, if he had said, how does it feel not being a billionaire? I could have said, well, how does it feel not? Oh, sorry, never mind. You are a billionaire. So. But it's, for me, what's interesting to me is, like, my life is super duper interesting. And I can speak to almost anyone in the world I want to. I just can get on the phone and talk to anyone, and that's not a problem. I travel. Well, I used to travel before coronavirus, but now I'm just stuck at home like everybody else. And I get the opportunity to do interesting things with technology, and I'm always creating something new, which is what I enjoy doing. And so, yeah, it's all great.
What about in terms of Wikipedia, and not as much the success you would have garnered from the monetization model? Do you think, do you ever go back? We just heard your philosophy about looking back and about hindsight, which is great. But do you ever think that there are some interesting counterfactuals that you consider in terms of the different ways in which Wikipedia could have been constructed, or should it be in the future, maybe?
Not so much. I mean, I think... there's a lot. It's a very complicated beast, Wikipedia, and so there's lots of things. But the core ideas have proven to be sound, and it's working quite well, and so on. So, not so much. I mean, I think when we think about the future, for me, what is fundamental for Wikipedia, like the most important thing, is what we call community health. Right? Are people enjoying the work? Is it an environment that's trustworthy, that's trusting, that's healthy, that's happy? People are being productive and they're enjoying themselves. As long as we preserve that, then Wikipedia can thrive and prosper. Whereas if we begin to see actually trolls are taking over, or, you can imagine the sorts of problems you might have, then you've got to be really vigilant and say, oh, what's causing that? But so far it's been quite good. So yeah, so far so good.
That's interesting, actually. These modern challenges that come with the internet. I mean, trolls are one. And then maybe another one, I heard you say, you spoke the neutrality was a big thing, or a big guiding principle. I guess, first of all, how do you see neutrality? How do you reconcile neutrality, or your thoughts around it, and how does sort of practical application or supervision of that work? What do you do? Where's the line?
Yeah, I mean, I think, most people have a pretty strong understanding of the concept, right? Which is to say, look, on any controversial issue, Wikipedia itself shouldn't take a stand, but should present all of the reasonable sides fairly. And so it's, oftentimes in journalism, you'll see kind of a weak, silly kind of neutrality. I always make the joke of, some say the moon is made of rocks and some say cheese, it's like, that's not neutrality really. That's
fake
just
fairness.
Fake fairness, right? But it is saying, okay, look, there are controversies in the world and we're not going to solve all those controversies and we have to treat them fairly and be thoughtful about it. And of course, these days, because we have the rise of very low quality news outlets, many of them incredibly biased and not really serious about doing journalism, you do have to be vigilant. The community is very vigilant about those sort of things, but we have to be vigilant in ourselves to say, well, look, we shouldn't exclude any media source because we disagree with its political stance. It's really about the quality of the work that they're producing. So, if they've got all the right procedures in place and they're serious about dealing with corrections fairly, and they're not sort of making things up and so on, then those are kind of really old-fashioned things. But I think most people in real life and day-to-day life, most people understand that. You say, oh, well, which would you prefer to get your science news from? Would you rather get it from a peer-reviewed academic journal, or would you rather get it from a screaming headline in a tabloid newspaper? And probably most people would go, please, I'll take the science, please. So.
Yeah. What other ways do you see we should improve the internet in? And also maybe asking from the angle of many of our listeners, as we said, it's a good time to do something and found something, and you don't need the perfect idea, but maybe also as inspiration on things to look at in the future.
Yeah, I mean, the things I'm currently looking at, I'm really intrigued by this. Here we are on Zoom. We're talking. I can see you. You can see me. This is the sort of thing. This technology existed for several years now, but people weren't using Zoom for meetings all the time. Like now, some people. I don't like meetings, so I try to stay off as much as possible. But my wife is on meetings all day long on Zoom, and that's different. In fact, it's to the point now where I saw that the number of minutes people are spending on Zoom has apparently just passed the number of minutes people spend on Facebook. So that's interesting. And I like to give this example though. So what? That's just people having business meetings because they're stuck at home and can't go to work. But like my family, so we have a weekly quiz, my family. So a different member of the family writes the quiz that week, and then we meet once a week. And my mother's in her 70s and she's there every week, and my sister and their kids and everybody. And it's like we have a family get together every Sunday, which we could have been doing for years, and we weren't doing it for years, right? And I live in London and my family lives in America and so on. Now I see them every week. It's very regular. The point is not the quiz. The point is just hanging out together. The quiz just gives us something to do, so we're not just staring at each other. And, it's fun. And I when you think about what does social media really mean, I'm like, okay, that's actually much more meaningful than, I follow my sister on Instagram and she posts pictures of her dog and I click a heart, I like your picture of your dog. That's not really social. Social is we're on and we're joking and we call it grandma points. If you get an answer wrong, but you beg enough, mom might give you a point if your answer was funny. I mean, it's just like that's human interaction, right? That is something more social and a use of. So that is one of the things I'm working on is a quiz app for video. But I'm working on all these kinds of ideas to say, let's move on. Let's just say, you know what? Social media doesn't have to just be about clicking on like on things. It's actually about human beings interacting with each other, and hopefully in a healthier way.
Right, like unrehearsed and spontaneous. And is there a contradiction between the sort of spontaneity and the unrehearsedness of real social interaction and the way in which the sort of regular way in which, or regularized way in which these things are being monetized? You want to put things in a box and people in a box.
Yeah, I mean, I think what's interesting is, if you, one of the things that I think a lot about, I don't have it, this is like me cutting edge thinking, and I'm not that smart actually, but I do think a lot. And for me, it's sort of, so this is not a new observation, but it's one I've been chewing on lately. Like we have kind of blurred on almost every platform the difference between performative social activity and interactive. So performative meaning, a lot of people post on Instagram and they are influencers and they're trying to get a lot of followers and they are, and they're trying to entertain us and so on. And that can be perfectly fine. I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but it's right there on the same feed with my sister posting a picture of her dog. And then I like it, which is much more interactive. My sister's not trying to get hundreds of followers. She's just sharing part of her life with her friends and family. And so the fact that we've blurred those two things under this big heading of social media, I think has sort of harmed our ability to think clearly about what are we trying to accomplish, and how to grow these things in new and interesting ways. So if you think about, something like Zoom, it's mainly a bit of business tool. Now it's boomed because of the current coronavirus circumstances. But as far as I can tell, Zoom is not trying to think about, how do we get more influencers on the platform so that people can follow and sign on to Zoom? It's not a thing they're thinking about. I mean, you could. There's no reason why you couldn't have some sort of a thing. But instead, they're just saying, okay, it's a communications tool, a platform, and they're, when they look at new features, it's not how do we get people addicted to clicking and checking in every day to make sure their Zoom points are okay. No, it's just like it's useful, and the best way to sort of grow it is for people to say, yeah, actually, it's a great tool. I love using it. So
yeah, I really hope they don't introduce Zoom points. That sounds like
yeah.
nightmare.
Well, this is, actually, if we can talk for a little bit about gamification as a concept,
please.
Which is very, very popular a few years back. People talk about it less, but and there's nothing inherently wrong with it, right? A gamification of certain things, that can be fine. Particularly games. I think you should gamify games because games are good at, it's like a game and there's a point and you try to get the points. But gamification, I always said to people they say, why don't you do some kind of point system in Wikipedia and gamification of Wikipedia? And I'm like, you know what? If you think about, imagine that you went to work in an office and you have to wear a badge and every day there's a number there that tells how many people like you or don't like you. Like that just seems like dystopia. It sounds horrible, right? We know genuine human interactions are not about how many follows you have and how many likes or dislikes. And in fact, oftentimes it's just like human complexity. Not everybody likes everybody, and there's interesting frictions. And then, there's this person, they do really great work, but, don't get them started on politics because honestly, they're a total bull. Like that's the reality of human interactions. And so this idea of reducing things down to a metric to kind of induce people to make that number go up is not always healthy and can be overused in a way that creates bad incentives for people to behave in like really weird and stupid ways.
Right. Isn't the tricky thing there that these games kind of exist? A lot of games exist in an unspoken way, in an unconscious way, but this is just a way of sort of, I don't want to use the word weaponizing, but I guess I'm gonna
it's
maybe
not
like
bad,
weaponizing.
Yeah, it's not a bad way to put it. I mean, everybody knows, like we all know, if you work with a group of people, it does matter that you are good at social interactions and that people like you because you can get things done that way. And if people dislike you, they're not going to help you and so on and so forth. And that's human. That's a real part of human interaction. But by sort of making it open incentives with numbers attached to it, then weaponizes it. It means, I'm going to give you a demerit because everybody's going to see and you're going to have a down point. And, that's not healthy, right? In fact, it's sort of very toxic. But saying at the same time, it's fine in certain contexts, right? If it's, if it is a game, then okay, it's fine. People have fun sort of being rowdy with each other. So
Right. Like, is it the other extreme of that, like removing all elements of any real game or any real, I mean, I guess the stereotype here is giving a participation trophy to everyone who is participating in a tournament and not ranking the winners, even though the kids know that who won and who scored the goal. That's the other side.
Yeah, and it can be a bit silly. Yeah. Well, like when I talk about my my family's weekly Zoom pub quiz, honestly, it's not even about the game, right? Mom makes up points and gives them out for silly answers, and it's just a social thing. It's a social interaction, and actually a lot of the best games in recent years that I like, for example, like I don't know if you've heard of Cards Against Humanity.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's hilarious, but the point of the game has nothing to do with the points, right? It's just like a group of friends, and you've got this artifact to play with together. And you see who's going to say something that's actually hysterical and outrageous, and you end up in tears laughing so hard. And it's not about, now we're going to go into a competition and earn more points and have a tournament, right? It's just not about that.
Yeah.
And
sorry, William, go ahead.
No, but I think it's very, very interesting, and like social media hasn't been around for that long still at the end of the day, and it's kind of gotten away from us in a way. But you mentioned in the beginning of the episode that you're building WT Social and trying to do your own take on that.
Yeah.
And maybe before we end, that would be interesting to hear about, because that's something we've been discussing quite a long time. That why isn't this being challenged in a proper way?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think there's a lot of really hard problems, and I'm approaching it in several different ways. One of the ways I'm approaching it isn't released yet, which is I'm really looking at how can we use interactive video in a new way, and think about what is social interaction on that being. There's a friend of mine has something called the Inter-Intellect Salon, and she invites different, clever, interesting people to have a conversation, and they do it on a Zoom call, and she gets like 25 people at the same time, and it's not yet a big scalable thing, but I find that very interesting. That's actually a different, and people pay, I don't know, like $10 or something to go on it. I'm like, that's actually interesting, right? That's a new form of social interaction that sounds pretty healthy to me as compared to trying to get more followers on social media. So, cool.
Yeah, maybe this could be like the new, we were doing podcasting and a while back back in the TV days when news cycles were very short and news inserts were very short and people were talking about attention spans and everything, and everyone said no one's going to want to listen to a 3-hour episode of a podcast, and just the cynical view of human interaction rose up. Maybe the same thing is going on with social media right now. It seems that the incentives, the algorithms are pushing the incentives and defining the incentives, but maybe there's some part of the human soul still there longing for that realness.
I mean, for sure. And podcasts have done very well with longer, in-depth things. It's a funny thing because the human mind is so multifaceted that we want lots of different things, sometimes at the same time, sometimes contradictorily. So what we want, if you say, what do you want to know about the election? You say, well, I really want to go and read a Wikipedia article and learn all the issues and what the candidates stand for. And people do actually want that. They also want to rant on Twitter. I want to watch, we see huge success from long form, very high quality television shows, right? So now it's the golden age of television, in my opinion. There's so much fantastic stuff being made. And that's long form, sort of extended drama, very complicated. At the same time, TikTok is massive, right? And that's, you couldn't get more fluffy and, just flick to the next. It's always girls dancing. I don't know why, but that's what's popular on TikTok. And, and I don't necessarily think either of those is invalid, right? One thing is, you're bored for a few minutes in a taxi, so you jump on TikTok and I like the cooking videos and they're smart. They figured out I like cooking videos, so they show me a lot of those. And then girls dancing, but and then they at the same time I want to watch long form like serious drama. So
yeah, no, exactly. It's interesting. It's not that easy at the end of the day. But we look forward to following all your projects and what you come up with next. And thank you for creating Wikipedia. I mean, that's
yes, great.
That's
fantastic. Yeah.
I have to say that the internet would not be the same without Wikipedia. I'm so happy
Oh,
it
that's
exists.
very kind of you. Very kind of you. Thank you.
And thank you to all the viewers and listeners also for joining in.
Great.
You comment what your favorite Wikipedia article is, and we'll see you in the next episode.
Brilliant.
Bye.
All right. Fantastic. Thanks,
Thank
guys.
you, Jimmy. Have a nice day.
Yeah. Bye.